Hello, everyone. Want to welcome you to VR Church's Easter service. Welcome. My name is DJ Soto. I'm one of the pastors here at VR Church. If this is your first time, we want to say hello. This is a real church, by the way. We get that question a lot. I just had something today in Discord. Hey, you guys role playing, or is this like making fun of church? What's going on here? I want to come to church. I can't go to church where I'm at physically for various reasons. I was like, no, this is a real church, a real community, and all of that. So I do want to welcome you guys to Easter service. So we got to get moving because there's a lot to do. Easter is actually going to be broken up into two parts. So today is part one of Easter. Part two is coming up next week. You'll see why it's broken up later. And there's a lot of scripture to go through. And what I love about what our volunteers have done is they're going to put us in the story. Maybe you've seen The Passion of the Christ with Mel Gibson or The Chosen, or perhaps you've read the story, but have you ever been there? Did you see Jesus as he was captured by the soldiers? But that's what the metaverse and VR is going to allow us to do. We're going to do that today, and I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to take our time, but also move quickly, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to maybe ask for some help. I'm reading, but I might do most of the reading just to keep things moving. And we're just going to see the story of Easter. And it's going to go into two parts. So I encourage you, definitely come back next week. And if this is your first time into church ever, I want to welcome you as well. And I encourage you to see the full story as well. Somebody might say, wait a minute, people don't go to church. And we just saw that in our Rust church a couple hours ago. What is church? They're like, I've never been to church. What is that? And so maybe for you, it's your first time. You're hearing about this Jesus person. Why did he die? I know something about him on the cross, and Easter is something about him coming to life. What is it about? Well, the story is what we're going to experience, and it's going to reveal something to you. So don't be, surprised at the end of the service if it kind of leaves you cliffhanging. Ever watched a movie or something on Netflix or Hulu or something, and it kind of ended, and they're like, you have to wait for next season? Well, you're not going to have to wait a full year for the next season to come out. Part two is going to be out next week. And so we are going to experience Easter together. And to experience what Jesus said in John 10:10, he says, I have come to give you life, and life to the full. That's why Jesus came. That's why we're going to see him experience what he did so that we could have life. Also in the book of John chapter 3, verse 16, it says, for God so loved this world, that he gave us Jesus. So you see encapsulated in the spirit of this Christ love. You see it captured in Christ, this spirit of life that he wants to give to each and every one of us. And so let's head over there right now. We're going to go experience it as if we were there. And so everyone follow me over to my right, over to your left. We're going to leave the church area here, and we're going to transport to the Middle East as we cross this bridge. No worries. This bridge is nice and sturdy. Now you just make your way right across over here. Now, if you've been coming to VR Church for a few weeks, you've noticed that we have been studying the book of Matthew. We've been going chapter by chapter from the book of Matthew. Today, we're in the book of John for the next couple of weeks. So John is the writer that we're going to experience today. And he has a story to tell. Oh, boy, there's a lot of drama, intrigue, controversy, conspiracy even. And so we're just going to take it all in and experience it as if we were there. Give everyone a minute to kind of make it over the bridge over there. And we'll begin here at John chapter 18, verse 1. And it says this, after saying these things, Jesus crossed the Kidron ravine with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Now, what things did he say? Well, back in John chapter 17, which, by the way, I encourage you to go to read. It's a beautiful chapter. It's really a prayer, the whole chapter. And at the end of it, it talks about the mighty love that God has for Jesus, and that love would be in his followers, or you and I. So it says prayer of the mighty love of God in our lives. And so after saying these things, talking about the mighty love of God, Jesus crossed the Kidron ravine with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Now let's head over here because now John just jumps right into the story. You see these soldiers here coming up the hill. And by the way it works at VR Church is, feel free to explore. You don't have to just, stay here if you want. Like if you want to go check out the avatars, you want to get it up nice and close, you want to get a picture, you want to get a selfie, feel free. There's a freedom here to move about. It's not rude. To check things out and explore and to go up to the avatars and all those things. But verse 2, now the writer gets right into it. Judas, the betrayer. Man, John doesn't pull any punches. He describes what is happening. Judas was a friend of Christ. Can you imagine one of your friends selling you out, saying false things about you? You end up in prison. Can you imagine that feeling of betrayal? Sometimes we think very technically of the story of the gospel. Oh, thank you. I'm not. Am I on air? I think I'm on air. You guys here? Let me turn it off and on again. All right, amplify. My voice is on, so I think I'm on. Right, Noodle. Yeah. So let me know, and then if we can, mods, let's try to keep it to one room. Oh, we got a second room open. Yeah, we probably needed that second room. Sorry, technical timeout. Mods, we have a second room open. So if we could have some mods head over there, because I think there's only like 3 people in that room, so they don't feel lonely. So if you have access to room 2, feel free to head over there and greet those people. What's up, Justin? Good to see you. All right, let's see. Verse 2, Judas the betrayer knew this place where Jesus had gone there many times with his disciples. And this is a little bit insidious, man, going right to where he knew Jesus would be, a private place. So let's head up over the hill a little higher. You see the Judas at the front.
Hello, Bishop Soto. I'm very sorry if I'm interrupting. I tried to send a text message, but are you on air? Yes, you are. There you are.
Oh, there we go. Yep, I saw it and then I didn't see it. So, but let me just go back and read this for people who might have missed it. Verse 1: After saying these things, Jesus crossed the Kidron ravine with his disciples and entered a grove of olive trees. Judas the betrayer knew this place, for Jesus had gone there many times with his disciples. Let's go right up here. It looks like Meta Mikey is part of he's got the torch here and the sword. In verse 3, the chief priests and Pharisees had given Judas a squad of soldiers and police to accompany him. Now, this is a little bit crazy, okay? Remember, it wasn't like Jesus was this revolutionary trying to overthrow the Roman government, saying these incendiary things, some talk of sedition and overthrow. No, Jesus was teaching in the temple. He was there. He spoke plainly. He wasn't hiding in the wilderness, secret newsletters, secret societies, that type of thing. No, it's very public, very open. And now you see this aspect. Oops, let me give this back to Judas here. Oops, I dropped it. Here's somebody hold this for me. There you go. Oops, it's going rolling down the hill. Catch it, Phantom. Oh, no. It's going down the hill there. So Judas had a squad of soldiers and police to accompany him. Now with blazing torches, lanterns, and weapons, they arrived at the olive grove. I mean, that is some intense stuff. Yeah, thanks, Justin. You can hold on to that, man. To bring the squad, to bring the torches. I mean, it's kind of like almost like that scene from Frankenstein where the whole crowd's coming out, to go capture the monster and the pitchforks and, blazing things. And you would think Jesus was this like evil person. Imagine being a bystander and seeing this squad of people walk by. Maybe, man, you must have thought, oh, what is happening? There must be some type of revolt happening. Well, let's read a little more. In verse 4 and 5, it says, Jesus, knowing what was about to happen to him, asked, "Who are you looking for?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And by the way, I'm going to turn on participation. That means you can help me read. There's a button that says read. If you don't mind reading in public, I'll probably ask for your help for a couple of verses. We might not get to everybody today. In verse 6, and as he said it, they all fell backwards to the ground. Now, if that was me, I'd be out. I'd be like, okay, all right, well, so there's something going on here. I'm out. But here in verse 7, once more, he or Jesus asked them, "Whom are you searching for?" And again, they replied, "Jesus." Now, we'll slow down here for a second. Everybody come if you feel comfortable, come amongst the soldiers and the torches. And if you imagine this was like happening in real time, that you were there, I don't know if you ever gotten pulled over by the police. Doesn't that kind of like make you a little tense or stressed out a little bit? Or if there's an altercation at work, or doesn't that kind of raise the anxiety levels a little bit? The heart rate starts to increase. Can you imagine? You're seeing spears and soldiers and torches, and they're all around you as a disciple, as a follower of Christ. Can you imagine the tenseness that you're feeling? The tensions are rising here in this moment. So Jesus asked them, and they said again, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And in verse 8, Jesus says, I told you I am he, Jesus said. And since I am the one you are after, let these others go. Let's look at verse 9. He did this to carry out the prophecy he had just made. I have not lost a single one of those you gave me. Remember, tensions are high. You're with the soldiers here. Vengeful one, you got that flaming torch going on. Things are tense, right? And so look what happens down here. We're all going to pop down here. This an assault. Peter, put away your sword, man. So Jesus is on the right. Poor Malchus is right here. Peter is over here on the left. In verse 10, it says, Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's servant. Wow, man, can you imagine? I was watching this movie where, it was tensions were rising up, and somebody was like a gang movie, and somebody pulled out a gun, and everyone was like, whoa, easy, easy. You could tell things are about to get crazy. And I feel like in that moment, Peter knew what was about to happen, pulled out his sword, assaulted Malchus, and man, can you imagine the scuffle that was about to break out? Almost like a little mini battle here. But in verse 11, Jesus said to Peter, put away your sword. Put your sword away. Shall I not drink from the cup the Father has given me? Jesus has been saying this whole time that it's not about overthrowing Rome. That's what the disciples really thought. Like, he's come to overthrow Rome. Some of the theologians believe that that's why Judas was trying to hurry up this revolution. The betrayal was more about, come on, let's push him into this overthrowing of Rome. And so Jesus is like, put your sword away. This isn't a battle that we're fighting here. In verse 12, let's head down here. So the Jewish police, with the soldiers and their lieutenant, man, they brought out the big guns, arrested Jesus and tied him. I mean, they wrapped him up, they tied him, they had a soldier escort. Can you imagine being one of those people to seeing that walking by? Maybe you're like, man, who is that person? The lieutenant's here. I heard there was a little scuffle. And by the way, in other gospel writers, give us a little more other details. Like John didn't include that Jesus healed the ear of Malchus. He just didn't leave him, bleeding out, ear on the ground. I know it's kind of graphic there, but Jesus healed Malchus's ear. And I think even at that point, remember when they fell back and when Jesus healed the ear, I'd be like, oh, I think we're good here. let's go on. And also what John doesn't display here that other people display or other gospel writers talked about is the disciples bailed. They all of them bailed. By the way, sometimes we're a little hard on the disciples because they just totally bailed on Christ and ran. But I don't know, man. You got the lieutenants, the governments, the police. You got this attack that just happened. There's blood, and now there's a healing, and they ran. And I know we were like, I can't believe the disciples fled, but maybe we would too. I'm not trying to be too hard on them. I mean, a sword just came out. Well, in verse 13, first they took him, or Jesus, to Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest, that year. Now, you're going to start to see a little something unusual. And there's a lot of detail that we're going to skip because John perhaps doesn't give it. Other gospel writers give a little bit of an indicator. And that is that, there's this moment where this is kind of all suspicious. Like, it's at night. They're trying to have this court case at night. Usually you just wait till the morning when the courts open up. You try to do all this. Was like a little bit it was very secretive, kind of under wraps. Like, let's keep this under wraps, under the cover of darkness type of thing. And so they took him to Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest. In verse 14, it says Caiaphas was the one who told the other Jewish leaders, better that one should die for all. So kind of like a little bit of a prophecy. Now let's look over here at verse 15 and 16. If I can have just a reader read for me wandering. If you don't mind reading verse 15 and 16.
Okay. Simon Peter followed along behind, as did another of the disciples who was acquainted with the high priest. That other disciple was permitted into the courtyard along with Jesus, while Peter stood outside the gate. Then the other disciple spoke to the girl watching at the gate, and she let Peter in.
All right. I believe John, thank you, wondering. I believe John is talking about himself when he says the other disciple. So John's including himself in what's happening here. Over here at verse 17, let's start to enter where the trial is. And this courtyard is a very significant moment. We're going to maybe read through it quickly, but I want you to bookmark this. Because I did say Easter is 2 parts, and that's true. We're going to wrap up the Easter story next week. But we're also going to do an epilogue about Peter. There's something real special that we're going to kind of glaze over today, but we're going to come back in a couple of weeks to really recapture or close off this Peter story. But in verse 17, the girl asked Peter, "Aren't you one of Jesus' disciples?" "No," he said, "I'm not." Peter is like, "I'm not. What are you talking about? I don't know him. Don't know the guy." Don't forget, another gospel writer said that Jesus told Peter that he would deny him 3 times before the rooster called out. So let's go here into the courtroom. I could have some people just role play here with me just a little bit. You're just kind of standing by the fire. Just kind of hanging it out. It's kind of filling out. I'm going to ask you to role play every now and then. Just kind of fill in the crowd. Twitch will like that. So let's see here. Verse 17, and let's head over here to verse 18 over here to my left. The police and the household servants were standing around a fire they had made, for it was cold, and Peter stood there with them, warming himself. All right, now we'll come back to the fire here in just a minute. So let's follow me around the house to the left. Verse 19, it says, inside the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers, what he had been teaching them. Don't forget, Jesus wasn't the secret society guy. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't, putting his message in some secretive way. He was completely teaching in the temple, openly, publicly. Let me have someone read verses 20 and 21 over here. Noodle, if you don't mind reading 20 and 21 for me.
Sure. Jesus replied, "What I teach is widely known, for I have preached regularly in the synagogue and temple. I have been heard by all Jewish leaders, and teaching nothing in private that I have not said in public. Why are you asking me these questions? Ask those who have heard me. You have some of them here. You know what I have said."
Exactly, Noodle. Thanks for reading that. Like I was mentioning before, Jesus is like, I was, teaching publicly. You guys know what I've been saying. Why are you asking? And ask those who heard me. Very public. Well, look at verse 22. And this is where things start to become physical. One of the soldiers standing there struck Jesus with his fist. Is that the way to answer the high priest he demanded? Let's continue to come over here around the other corner. In verse 23, "If I lied, prove it," Jesus replied. "Should you hit a man for telling the truth?" Over here, verse 24, "Then Annas and Jesus bound to Caiaphas, the high priest." So you're going to notice oftentimes they're not going to answer his questions. They're not going to, finish an interrogation. They're just going to go right to guilty and right to crucify him. Here's Jesus over here. Got the soldiers. They've bound him up as a criminal. Well, let's get over here by the fire because this John kind of weaves the story in and out again. Thank you, Wondering, and those that are warming your hands by the fire. In verse 25, it says, "Meanwhile, as Simon Peter was standing by the fire, he was asked again, 'Aren't you one of his disciples?' 'Of course not,' he replied." Verse 26, but one of the household slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Didn't I see you out there in the olive grove with Jesus?" Verse 27, again, Peter denied it, and immediately a rooster crowed. John doesn't talk about what happened, but other gospel writers talked about how when the rooster crowed, Peter came to remembrance of what Jesus said, that he would deny him 3 times. And it says he went out and wept bitterly, just completely devastated. Peter, to have betrayed his friend, to have abandoned his friend, to have denied his Lord. It said that Peter ran out bitterly. Now, they're going to bookmark this thought. And I know that's kind of like, we're going to kind of weeks out, but man, and we have part 2 coming next week. And then the week after, we have this story about Peter. Oh man, I'm getting ahead of myself. This moment just of weeping bitterly. And that story comes later in chapter 21. But let's head over here because, man, one character I find super fascinating in this, and I don't think anything in particular for me, is Pilate. He's a super fascinating character. He's part of the Roman Empire, kind of like his attitude seems a little bit aloof to Jesus, kind of at first, like, what is this? What's going on? I'm not into this. But then you see that it increases to the point where he becomes fearful about what's to happen. So let's head over in here to where Pilate is, because I think it's a very interesting story. We have a lot going on here. Let's just kind of get settled here in the courtyard. We have the religious leaders who have brought this crazy indictment against Christ. They're gonna really rile up the crowd. Talk about groupthink. I've been in a situation where there's like a mob forming, and sometimes you don't know why you're part of this mob and what we're angry about. There's going to be a little bit of that happening. Look over there, a little foreshadow of Pilate and Jesus being presented by Pilate. But here in verse 28, so Jesus is brought here. Let me have someone read verse 28 and 29 for me. Let's see who's next. Ben, if you don't mind reading 28 and 29.
Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. Next, he was taken to the palace of the Roman governor. His accusers wouldn't go in themselves, for that would defile them, they said, and they wouldn't be allowed to eat the Passover lamb. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man? What are you accusing him of doing?"
And Ben, if you don't mind reading verse 30, actually, that'd be helpful.
We wouldn't have arrested him if he weren't a criminal, they retorted.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Okay, well, answer the question to Pilate. No, they wouldn't. He says, what are you accusing him of? And you would think they would answer, but they didn't. They says, well, we wouldn't have arrested him if they weren't a criminal, retorted. And you're going to see Pilate start to be like, all right, what's happening here? All right, I don't have time for this almost. But a couple of things to note. Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. That started in the early hours. That makes sense. Courts open, process and procedure. We're going to start this, imminent and impending case that's coming up. But the trial didn't start in the morning. It ended in the morning. We already see something insidious happening here. So they take him to the palace of the Roman governor because they can't just go off and just kill Jesus. I think they would have, by the way. I think we can see that things are going on behind the scenes, and I think they would have just taken him away and just done away with him. But they have gotten in major trouble with Rome. They didn't want to stir up things in Rome, so they needed Pilate as part of their plan. They needed his approval to end the life of Christ. And so they bring him to Pilate, and he said, all right, what's your charge? And they don't got an answer for him. In verse 31, it says this. Well, Pilate says, then take him away and judge him yourselves by your own laws, Pilate told them. So you could see Pilate was like, listen, I don't got time for this. You guys didn't even answer my question. Just take him, do whatever you got to do with your own laws. Check this out, man. But we want him crucified, they demanded. And your approval is required. Whoa. Why are we killing him already? Did Jesus kill somebody? Did he steal? Did he do a revolt? What's happening here? Remember, back there, he says, I have spoken publicly. What have I said that is false, and they wouldn't answer him. Pilate is saying here, what is his crime? We're not going to answer him. But they went straight to the crucifixion. They want him killed, and they want his approval. So you could tell, man, things are just going off the rails, by the way. And for those that, might be new to church, we're going through the book of Matthew. So I know, because like in this moment, you're like, wow, what happened before this? And so after we can finish up our Easter series, we're going to go back to Matthew, and you're going to see that kind of building up of what's happening, that tension with the religious leaders. Jesus going against the religious establishment of the day, this religious establishment that was about rules and regulations and an endless list of do's and don'ts, and Jesus coming in to talk about the faith and love and power of God in your life. And that threatened them. And so much so that they wanted him killed. In verse 32, it says, this fulfilled Jesus's prediction concerning the method of his execution. Oh, man, take it easy. All right, well, let's go in here because there's more to be had. Let's go inside the Roman governor's abode here. And like I said before, for me, Pilate's a very interesting character, just to see how he awakens to something that's greater than we know here to be on earth. Let me have somebody read 33 through 35. Let's see who's next on the list. Maria, if you don't mind reading 33 through 35.
Then Pilate went back into the palace and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. King as you use the word, or as the Jews use it, Jesus asked. "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and the chief priests brought you here. Why? What have you done?"
Yes. And by the way, Pilate's not going to get a super clear answer on this. So we're just going to give you a little bit of a heads up. They're going to have a conversation, and you're going to see the evolution of Pilate, this Roman governor, this ruler of this land, how he's kind of has this like, all right, listen, going back to the palace, Jesus come in. "Are you king of the Jews?" he asked him. And so Jesus says, what kind of king are you talking about? Jesus right here starts to introduce this thought that yes, he is a king, but not in terms of earthly king, something spiritual, something otherworldly, something heavenly. And so at some point, in this, just a little bit of a spoiler alert, Pilate is going to realize that. And once he realized that, he does not want Jesus to be crucified. You're going to see this kind of evolution of this, kind of aloof Roman governor to one who becomes heavily invested in what's going on. It's because even here in verse 35, "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. What have you done? So now we see this interaction with Pilate and Jesus. And by the way, remember, we're saying each gospel writer kind of write different details. Pilate's wife had a dream and says, have nothing to do with this man. So that's kind of like an interesting little thing that John doesn't necessarily display. Verse 36 and 37. Let's see who's next on the list. Vengeful, can you read 36 and 37 for me?
Okay. And Jesus answered, "I am not an earthly king. If I were, my followers would have fought when I was arrested by the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate replied, "But you are a king then?" "Yes," Jesus said. "I was born for that purpose, and I came to bring the truth to the world. All who love the truth are my followers."
All right, Vengeful. Thank you so much for reading that. Appreciate that. So I believe, this is just my observation, that in verse 34, Jesus introduced, like, there's something different going on here to Pilate, and now he just plainly says it. I'm a king, but I'm not an earthly one. And in verse 37, I feel like, again, this is personal observation, kind of like a personal theory, that this is when something started to kind of activate in Pilate's mind, because he goes, "But you are a king then?" And Jesus gave his response. Let's head upstairs, because now things, the drama increases. What was supposed to be just a kind of a normal day here, Pilate, becomes a historical moment. Let's head out here into the crowd, verse 38. And imagine you kind of put yourself here at the edge. Let's just kind of slow down a little bit, kind of immerse ourselves in the story. We're a little bit of a fly on the wall. Pilate comes back out here with Jesus. And in verse 38, kind of philosophically, Pilate says, "What is truth?" Pilate exclaimed. Then he went out again to the people and told them, check this out, he is not guilty of any crime. Okay, there you go. He is not guilty of any crime. You know, when Jesus was over there, they couldn't give him an accusation. When they brought him before Pilate, there was nothing, an accusation they could bring, certainly worthy of death. And Pilate says he is not guilty of any crime. And then at 39, he thought he was going to do something kind of interesting that would work. About this gentleman named Barabbas. But he says, you have a custom of asking me to release someone from prison each year at Passover. So if you want me to, I'll release the king of the Jews. But in verse 40, it says, but they screamed back, no, not this man, but Barabbas. By the way, Barabbas was a robber. It wasn't this like vague accusations they were bringing against Jesus. He actually committed the crime. He actually was the robber. But now let's go back into the story here, into this room and to the left, because now we're going to enter chapter 19 down these stairs. Now the conversation with Pilate and Jesus gets intense very soon. I give everybody a minute. Come down the stairs. Everybody okay over here? And verse 19, verse 1, it says this, then Pilate laid open Jesus' back with a leaded whip. In verse 2 over here, and the soldiers made a crown of thorns and placed it on his head and robed him in royal purple. And you could kind of see this mockery that's happening of Jesus Christ. Got the robe, that's a mockery thing, the crown of thorns. They laid his back open with a whip. And in verse 3, in a mocking way, a hail, King of the Jews, they mocked and struck him with their fists. Well, let's head outside over here as the story continues. In verse 4, it says, Pilate went outside again and said to the Jews, I'm going to bring him out to you, but understand clearly that I find him not guilty. Now, let me have someone read verses 5 through 8. Let's see who is next. Meta Mikey, if you don't mind reading verse 5 through 8 for me.
Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said, Behold the man. At the sight of him, the chief priests and Jewish officials began yelling, Crucify, crucify. You crucify him, Pilate said. I find him not guilty. They replied, By our laws, he ought to die because he called himself the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was more frightened than ever.
All right. Thank you, Meta Mikey. Did you guys see the evolution of what's happening in Pilate's brain and his realization, his consciousness? Don't forget, another gospel writer talked about his wife saying to have nothing to do with this man. So he brings him out, the crown of thorns, kind of mocking him. Maybe he thought it would pacify the Jews a little bit. I don't know what was going through his mind. I'm just kind of inferring from the scripture that, let's kind of rough him up a little bit. Maybe that'll appease him. And he says that the Jewish officials began yelling, Crucify, crucify. And Pilate said, I find him not guilty. And when the religious leader says he must die because he called himself the Son of God, Pilate heard this and he was more frightened than ever. I believe the reason Pilate was more frightened than ever was because he believed them. Maybe the Jewish leaders didn't believe them. Maybe the crowd didn't believe him. But I think Pilate came to the realization, wait a minute, he is a king, and he's a king from a heavenly realm. I don't understand it all. This isn't all making sense. My wife just had this weird dream. Something's happening here that is beyond this earth. And so let's head back into verse 9. So let's go in here to the building over to the left. Because Jesus, or like I said, Pilate's freaked out now. So let's go into this private conversation. A little fly on the wall here in the jail cell. And let me have someone read verses 9 through 11. Nick, if you don't mind reading verse 9 through 11 for me. Nick, are you there? I don't know if I can hear me. I don't think I can.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go,
Can
Nick.
hear
I
me?
can hear you. Yep.
He took Jesus back into the palace again and asked him, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave no answer. "You won't talk to me," Pilate demanded. "Don't you realize that I have the power to release you or to crucify you?" And Jesus said, "You will have no power at all over me unless it were given to you from above. So those who brought me to you have the greater sin."
Thank you so much, Nick. So Pilate probably, let's just kind of back up a little bit. Let's just kind of sympathize with Pilate just for a minute. Pilate's probably had many court cases come before him. You know, there's a lot of insurrections that happened in Rome that were squashed. He's probably put to death some insurrection leaders, you know, threw people in jail, had people crucified. But this was definitely different. If you see through the whole narrative, something is going on from the dream to the weird response of the crowd and the religious leaders to the stranger response of Jesus talking about heaven. And now I believe Pilate's coming to the realization that this is true. And he became more frightened than ever when he heard the religious leaders talk about him being the Son of God. And so now he's like coming to Jesus, and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I don't think this question about where are you from was like, "Are you from Nazareth? Are you from like the Sea of Galilee area?" I honestly think he was asking, like, what dimension are you from? What heavenly realm are you? Where did you come from? Almost kind of like you would ask an alien, right? That's not technically what's happening here, but I think he was asking something. Where are you from in the heavenly realm? Are you the Son of God? What is happening? But Jesus gave no answer. Pilate says, "I have the power to crucify you." And then Jesus gave this response. So boom, this whole revelation that Pilate has, or this whole experience that Pilate has gone through, the revelations comes into full moment here in verse 12. If everyone turns around and looks behind you. In verse 12, it says, "Then Pilate tried to release him." Now, why would he try to release him? Because he's innocent. This is all isn't making sense. This is otherworldly. Something spiritual is happening. Something's really penetrating the heart and mind of Pilate, and he tried to release him. But check out this like manipulation here. But the Jewish leaders told him, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar's. Anyone who declares himself a king," which Jesus technically did, but not on earth, and Pilate knew that. He's talking about the heavenly. But they were going to use this claim of him being a king as a rebel against Caesar. Now, Pilate don't mind no man. He don't care about no money. Who are these people coming in? I don't care about this Jesus. I don't care. He's not afraid of anybody except one person, the Caesar. The Roman Caesar of the time has authority over Pilate. And in this manipulative way, you see that the religious leaders use this comment about Jesus being king, but not on earth. And so I don't know if Pilate would have time to explain that to the Caesar. I don't know how that worked politically, but once word got to the Caesar that Pilate did not punish someone claiming to be a king, that probably wouldn't have gone well for Pilate. And so that was this manipulative moment, kind of like whatever Pilate did, it wasn't going to end well for him. And by the way, before we finish part 1, this is going to be a cliffhanger. Easter part 2 is going to be coming up next week. Kind of peek over there, because these two guys are important. The thieves on the cross. These guys, a little foreshadowing, really important part of the Easter story. And we're just going to kind of take a quick moment just to acknowledge these two thieves would eventually be crucified with Christ. Huge part of the Easter story. But let's go wrap up part 1 of Easter. Got a few minutes left and we'll head outside. Before we wrap up, thank you so much, build team, Carol, and Alice, Pastor Alina, and I know I'm missing some names. Maybe Pastor Alina at the end. We can just give an acknowledgement to all who's touched this experience for creating the avatars, creating the build, helping us to experience the story as if we were there. But let's wrap up here at the end of Easter Part 1, to be continued. Garrett, if you don't mind reading verses 13 and 14 for me.
No problem. At these words, Pilate brought Jesus out to them again and sat down at the judgment bench on the stone-paved platform. It was now about noon of the day before Passover. Pilate said to the Jews, "Here is your king."
All right, thank you so much, Garrett. And so, at these words, Pilate, the words of these religious leaders using that manipulation against him, against the Caesar, they brought him out. He sat down here, and Pilate said to the Jews, "Here is your king." Now, I think when he said it this time, remember they were mocking him before? I think he was actually like, no, here's your king. Like, almost as if to say, don't do this. Don't make this mistake. This is kind of like this final moment, this final plea in one sense. Here is your king, not in a mocking way, in a truthful way. Let me have someone finish off the chapter for me. Chad, hello. If you don't mind reading 15 through 16 for me. Are you there, Chad? I don't think I hear
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Can you hear me now? All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Away with him. They yelled, "Away with him, crucified him." "What? Crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar." The chief priest shouted back, and Pilate gave Jesus to them to be crucified.
Thank you, Chad. Hello. Appreciate that, my friend. Away with him, they yelled, "Crucify him." And Pilate's still kind of like, what are you talking about? Crucify your king? Like, I think Pilate was still hanging on, just in disbelief. Like, you ever been in a kind of a moment of disbelief in a conversation and a conflict, and you're just kind of like, this isn't even making sense. Now think about it from Pilate's perspective. And look at this kind of like, I don't know, stab in the heart, kind of like a knife in the back type of thing. When you think of God giving King Jesus to his people, and they're like, "We have no king but Caesar." The chief priest shouted back. Such a drastic and horrible moment. And in verse 16, it's kind of like, I feel like Pilate released it. And remember, other gospel writers wrote different things. There's a moment where Pilate washed his hands and says, I have nothing to do with this. Kind of like wash his hands from that. And in verse 16, it says, "Then Pilate gave Jesus to them to be crucified." And so here ends Easter Part 1. And I don't know, maybe for you, it's kind of like, man, this is a crazy story. Maybe you're hearing this for the first time. Like, this is an unfair trial. They don't even have a charge against him. Pilate is going through whatever he's going through. And at the end of the day, Jesus is being sent to be crucified. He's going to die. He's going to die for the sins of the world. And so in Easter Part 2, we're going to see the crucifixion of Christ and the resurrection, because that's what Easter is all about. It's not about just the death of Christ and just his burial. We're going to experience that. We're going to walk up the hill of Golgotha. We're going to see the cross, walk into the tomb in Part 2. But that's not where Jesus stayed. He came back to life. And we're going to see the reaction of his disciples in that moment, because, he'd been telling them, this temple is going to be, torn down, but it'll raise up 3 days later. They weren't connecting with the message. So we're going to see his death. We're going to see his burial. Then we're going to see him rise to life. We're going to see the reaction of the disciples. We're going to see them hiding because, the things are going crazy with the Roman government. And we're going to see the beautiful ending to this story. But Part 1 is a cliffhanger. Part 1 is to be continued. I know it seems sad and somber, but as they say, the resurrection is coming. So let us close in a word of prayer. And then after I pray, I would love to take just a quick picture with everyone, if you don't mind. If you don't want to be in the picture, no worries. But after I pray, we'll take a quick picture. I guess maybe room 2. You can kind of take a picture with everyone in room 2, whoever's over there. And we'll get a couple pictures going, or I don't know if we can get everyone in here, but I think the time knocks it out, doesn't it? Yeah. All right, my friends, let's close in a word of prayer. God, we just want to just take a moment and just to say thank you for all that you've gone through for us, all the injustice, the unfairness, situations that of abandonment from your disciples, and you're going through this path because you loved the world. You're going to die for the world. You will rise again. God bless everyone in here to realize that Jesus has come to give us life and life to the full, that God so loved this world that he gave Jesus, that we are, because of Easter, to experience the life and love and the power of God in our life. God bless us as we continue our story next week, and even with a little epilogue the week after. Bless everyone here with whatever they're going through. And in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen, my friends. That is the end of the service for today. Thank you so much for your time. Let's go get a quick picture here. Maybe where's a good backdrop here? Pastor Elena, where do you think is the best one? Oh, maybe here with maybe here with kind of like in the pilot. This might be good right here. If you want to be in the picture real quick, a little social media action, come stand over here. Us over here. Okay. Yeah. Everyone get next to pilot and stuff. All right, let's take a few pictures. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Let's see how that looks. That's pretty good. Let me get another one a little closer.
I can
3, 2. Is that Aaron?
Oh, I can use the Jimmy Cam a little bit here to get you in it as well.
Yeah,
so we're not missing anyone.
Yeah, go for it.
We got Alina facing backwards there. Okay.
Did you get that shot?
Okay, got everyone.